Hello and welcome back. My newest hobby is top mandala painting on rocks. As is my usual behavior, I've watched tons of videos for months, collected supplies, and finally got around to making a few first rocks. First one was one simple round I did for my brother. Then his housemate, I made a tea light. And one for my best friend, and the third rock for my other best friend. They're not perfect, but for my first try, they're not bad. I can at times be a perfectionist and my worst critic. In all my hobby endeavors, I try to make a lot of my tools and accessories to save some of my money for the things that I either can't make or do not wish to make. Today, we're going to be making a support donut. This one is made of silicone. And I saw this while watching a summer tam class that I took, and she used it to hold an egg, but I thought that could be useful to hold anything because it's a nice soft cushiony ring. So I'm going to show you how to make that, two different variations. So first we're going to be making the mold. So I have a ring. My outer is 4 inch. The inner is 2.5 inch. This one's bigger than the first one I made. Then I have strips of paper. And as I'm gluing up, I'll give you more details on that. You'll see it has little notches. So I kind of made a semicircle and slid the ring over it to figure out the size that I needed. And then cut my strip. And we're going to start gluing it up. I use a needle bottle with a needle tip tool just because it's easy and it's very precise. So I'm just going to put little dots of glue on just like the first 4 little things because I want it to get tight up against the edge. And I'm going to hold that in place for like, a few seconds, minute. You want it to grab. You don't want it to let loose while you're working around. So just be patient. This is probably the most time-consuming part, is all the gluing up as you go around. But it's worth it in the end. So once you think that it's set pretty well, you're just going to flip it over and look for the next group of empty V's. And again, just put a little dot of glue on a couple. I do about 5 or 6 at a time. I don't want to do too many because when I line it up, I want to make sure it's nice and tight against the ring. Once I have it tight against the ring, I'm just going to push it down. And I found a cup that fit pretty nicely over so that I can just slide it down and press on the cup, and that cup will hold that whole section in place with even pressure. So it's a lot easier than holding with my fingers where only my fingernails are touching. We're just going to keep doing that process each time around until we get the whole way around. So again, just little dots of glue on a section. If you get it on your table, just rub it off or work on a mat. Get it nice and tight up against the ring. Hold it in place so you can slide your cup on there and let it sit. So in between while we're waiting, I'm going to tell you about how I did my strips. I'm fortunate enough to have a Cricut machine. So I cut my circle or my donut and my strips of paper using that because it's much quicker. I will put a link to the file down below, so if you have a Cricut machine, you can go ahead and use that. Don't worry if you don't have a Cricut machine, that's fine. I cut strip of paper. It's 1 1/4 inches because I wanted 1 inch high, 1/4 inch for the fold over edge. And you're going to score a line 1/4 inch from one edge. That's going to be your fold line. And that's where you're going to be folding up your little V's. On the inner circle, you technically don't need the V's. You could just make little slits because the way that you're turning it is making it, oh, my leg just popped off. Oh. Hopefully you can still see. Again, I'm going to go ahead and get this next section in place and then press that. Okay, so where was I? The strips. So on the inner circle, because of the way it folds around the inner, it's going to spread out if you just have little strips. When you do the outside, you do need the V's because you're compressing it in the opposite direction, so you need room for that to move around without getting double layers and thick cardstock on the bottom. And all that can be done by hand. You could cut this with a pinking shears or a zigzag scissor, or you can do it by hand. That's very tedious, I understand that, but it is possible. It's just an option. So we're just going to keep working on this, and I'm almost the whole way around. So we're just going to go ahead and get this next section lined up and press it down. So again, do it by hand, or you can access the Cricut file that I'll put a link to on the bottom. Now, when we get to the end section, you have a little bit of an overlap, which is fine because you want that extra support. So once I do the last group of V's and get those set, then I'll come back in, and this one is come back in, get that all pressed down and pressed up tight against there. Sometimes you just have to work it a little bit because you're pressing it down, but you want it as flush as you can get it. We're going to just glue that little section together. Then we'll start working on the outside piece. So here's my last little section where it's overlapped, and I've got just like a little hair clip. I tried my sewing things, but those left indentions. I tried clothespins that didn't have a big enough surface. I found these hair clips, and they've got a nice flat surface, so I can just slide it on and clip. I do a lot of gluing up of custom boxes, so these came in very handy for me. Now, in between using your glue, go ahead and make sure you put your lid back on. It will dry up and clog up the thing if you have it. Okay, on the outside circle, we just have our strip of paper, and I'm going to go ahead and fold those little notches down, and then we'll start working on the outside edge. Now on the outside edge, I'm pretty sure my piece of paper is not going to be long enough, so I will have to take another strip, which is not a problem. You just have a couple join lines. Again, this works the same way. You're going to just start with your first couple, whoops, way too much glue. You only need a tiny little bit. You don't want it squishing out everywhere. So I just put on the first 4, and then go ahead and hold that in place. Now, I don't know if this will still fit. Yeah, this cup's not big enough, so I'll just have to reach my finger in there for now, but I can go find a bigger cup so I can reach that inner edge to hold it down instead of my fingers. That will be much easier than keeping my fingers in there the whole time. So I went and got a bigger cup, and I realized it's probably going to make it a little harder to see. But again, so now we got the first couple started. We're just going to work a section with our dots, and we're going to slide it around. Once it's in place, we can go ahead and slide our cup on there. I apologize, this cup is quite big and is probably blocking your view so that you can't really see anything, but there's nothing to see at this point in time anyway. We're just holding that in place until the glue grabs hold. what we'll be doing is we'll be working the whole way back around. So I'm going to pause you till I need to add a strip. So our first strip is on. We just need to add a second strip. So I'm just going to eyeball it to see about how long we need it. And then just trim my length. And go ahead and get my folds bent in. And essentially we're just going to glue this on just like we did the first strip. So I'll be back when that's all done. Okay, so we finished gluing the outer piece on. Now we want to flip it over, and there were a few that as I was gluing down kind of got missed. So I'm just going to come back in and go ahead and get those glued into place and just kind of press the whole thing down for a second. Make sure those are all nice and attached. One very other important thing that we will do before we can even pour this mold, and this is very important, and I can tell you by experience, we kind of want to seal everything. First couple molds I did, I poured with silicone and it came out the minute holes and was everywhere. That's where this new needle tool bottle comes in handy too. So I just squeeze a generous amount of glue the whole way around the inner edge where that seam is. When it glues, or when it dries, it's going to create a seal. You could use a hot glue gun also, but a hot glue gun is going to be harder to get into that small space. It's also going to leave a bigger blob, I guess, or a bead, whatever you would call it. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the outer edge. And once you got your speed going, you can just kind of squeeze around there. Yes, it's going to take a little bit to dry, but that's not a big deal. Take a break, go have some coffee, eat some lunch, whatever you're doing. Take a meditation break. Just don't rush it. So we're almost around this width. So once I have this glue going, nice and tight. And if you're worried, you can always put some up along the seam too, just to be safe. I think I have that glued pretty well, but it can't hurt to be safe. I think I have one more seam here. It's very difficult to see because my lighting is not very good. Okay, so this is the finished mold. Now, on the first one, like I showed you, I poured this with silicone. I didn't pour the whole way up. You can make it as shallow as you want. I just wanted to have enough room. Now, I realize silicone can be a little pricey. So with this one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to pour this one with plaster, and then on the inner round, I'm going to be carving it kind of at an angle, and then I'll put a foam top on it. So you don't have the cost of the silicone, but you still have a semi-spongy top. Now, it's good for sitting rocks on. You wouldn't be able to stick it down in. Like if this one, I can actually press that into the silicone ring to hold it because it's flexible. You're not going to be able to do that with the plaster ring. But if you have it sized to the product that, or the items that you work on the most, you just size it to what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and put you on pause till I go pour this and come to the next step. Okay, so I've poured my mold using plaster and just took it out. It's very, very soft. So I don't want to move it too much because it's still very flexible. But it's also soft. It's a good time to maybe do some carving. So on the nicest side, I'm just going to go ahead and on the inner ring, carve a nice angle. What that'll do is when I'm all done, it just kind of gives it another a nicer surface for whatever rock you're putting on there to kind of sink in a little bit and be held and cushioned. Anyway, I'll just keep working on this until it's the right roundness that I want. After you're all done, you can clean up the outer edges too a little while it's still soft. And you can do your final when it's drier. It's way messier with the dust than when it's dry. Then the final step on your plaster one is once it's dry, this is just a piece of craft foam. And what I would do is I would go ahead and kind of glue that on and glue it down into there. And that will provide you a cushioning agent so that you're not putting your stone against the very hard plaster. If you shelf liner is another possible thing, but this foam liner is fine. This is the thin one. You could use a thicker piece. And then once you're all done, then you have a base for your rock. So again, you can choose to pour it with silicone, which is a little more costly, or you could do it with the plaster, and that'll work just fine as well. Thank you for watching this video, and the next video we're going to make kind of like a wedging surface, so you can put your stone at an angle to get to certain areas easier. We'll see you then.